Hey friends, and welcome back to week three of our 30-day DevOps challenge, specifically in Azure. We are building out solutions, projects that you can use to either skill up, land a new job, or maybe just learn a different cloud. Whatever reason you're here, welcome back. Glad to have you. My name is Alicia, and today we are going to be diving into infrastructure and automation, which is really, I say, the heart of the cloud. Like, the whole point of this thing is to be able to do everything better, faster, more secure, easier to track changes. Anything that you could think of to take you from point A to point Z and make things better, I think you can do it in the cloud, and automation is the heart of it. So we'll be diving into Terraform. There are some other IAC or infrastructure as code tools that you could use, like Chef, Ansible, Jenkins, you name it. But we're doing Terraform today. So without further ado, let's just jump straight into it, right? I'm going to bring the knowledge. You bring your laptop and follow along, and I'll see you in the cloud. All right, guys, can we just take a moment, though, before we get too deep into this? Can we just take a moment to appreciate this art?
Oh my God! Wow!
Like, I don't have a creative bone in my body, so whenever things like this happen, I get excited. Shout out to Canva. But for the entire month of March, every Thursday, so the 13th, the 20th, the 27th, and April 3rd, I will be going live at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and hosting live training sessions for those of you who are interested in getting a certification the week of April 7th through 11th. So I figured with us giving away 50 free certs, let's all have some live study sessions where we come together and answer things about the cloud. So we're going to watch some training videos together. We're going to do some Q&As together. Shout out to the co-founders. I have Shae and Kat both pulling up on the first session to study with us. So expect some live interviews. Who knows what we're willing to do? We love keeping this thing fun and exciting. So push up. It's going to be on my YouTube live, so make sure you're subbed up. We'll also probably do a LinkedIn live as well. But I just had to share on this because I think it's pretty fire. But let's jump into the technical side of things, right? So as you all know, last week, we built out this solution without Terraform. We built out a solution where we go to this API and we say, hey, give me this data, give me this information. It gives us a bunch of text that doesn't really mean much to the human eye. From that, we put that text file in a container. So we save it, we store it somewhere. And then we go and say, hey, I want to actually get a video version. So it scans for the URL. It goes to that website. It downloads the video. And then it stores the video in this container as well, right? So we're going out, getting data, and then storing those highlights within this container. Well, I'm not going to go too far in the weeds of like what we did because it's all in the video from last week. But, for those of you who are skimming through, I wanted to make sure you at least understand this at a high level. Now, what we're doing this week is we're putting Terraform in the mix to automate the creation of our infrastructure. So anything that you see here within this box is not necessarily within this Azure resource group and within Azure per se, but I wanted to call out to you that this is the part that Terraform is handling, creating these actual resources in these instances. And when we get into the live demo, I'll show you how that is important to track some of the changes. So that's what's going on. Let's go ahead and jump into the cloud, right? So I don't want to spend a whole lot of time going over these files because they largely stay the same, right? We do pull out some of the configurations. Like last week we used create resources.py, and that was to create like the storage account. Now we're doing our big dog stuff. We're not using Python scripts to create infrastructure anymore. We're putting on our big boy and our big girl pants. We're using Terraform to do that. So there are some changes to not using that, but the most important one that I wanted to call out from a Python script perspective is this update env py, right? So actually what this script is going to do is after Terraform creates these resources, it's going to go out and it's going to get the Azure storage account name, the Azure storage account key, and the Azure Blob container name, and then it's going to update our .env file with this information. So that way when we go to run all py, which is where we like run the fetch script, where we run the processing script in that order, it has the proper variables from what we just created. So this is just creating another layer of automation where instead of you having to manually go get those variables from Azure or from the CLI itself, it fetches it for you, or it grabs those variables for you and injects it into our .env file. So for those of you who weren't here last week, our .env file, or really any of the weeks that we've done this, our .env file just holds some of our environment variables, like our API key, so we can authenticate and get access to the data, our Azure subscription ID, so that way we can create these resources within the proper account. Some of the stuff to configure our storage, which we said is going to be dynamically ingested in, so that's why we're leaving that blank. And then just some application configuration information. That was a lot.
Boy, if you don't shut your
application configuration information. Yeah. I did put a dynamic date in here. If you have a date of a specific highlight or game within the NCAA that you're interested in, feel free to swap that out, but you're at your own risk, right? I just made sure that this worked on December 1st, 2023. Anything outside of that, you tell me. No, it should work though. If the API has the data, it should be able to process it right. But anyways, cool. So those are like the Python scripts, right? Go out and grab the data, process the data, make sure that all of the proper stuff is loaded in our environment. And this is actually what we're going to use to run all of this right here, instead of having to manually like run fetch, run process, etc. So cool. If you need more details about any of this stuff, feel free to go back to my video last week and look through some of that information. This is setting up that string that is needed. This actually creates that string here for our Azure storage account. And cool. So Terraform, that's the main reason why we're here this week, right? Because everything else, like, we did it already. But Terraform, how do we use it? Let's start off with our main.tf file. So I want to use relatable examples, things that you do on a day-to-day basis, not a day-to-day, but things that you've heard of or you're familiar with. So that way these things that you're not familiar with might make a smidge bit more sense. So what this file is actually doing is, I like to think about it as the blueprint for our cloud infrastructure. It's going to tell Terraform exactly what we want to build on Azure, right? So it's going to go and create our resource group. It's going to go and create the storage account that we need. It's going to go and create the blob container using that storage account ID, right? So think about this like if we were building a house, right? An architectural plan for a house. The blueprint is going to show you where the rooms go, what materials to use, how everything connects. In our case, it's going to define resources like the resource group, which is like our plot of land, right? Our resource group is like, where are these things going to be housed? Where is this thing going to be built? Where is this infrastructure going to live? Our storage account, I like to think about that as the house itself, right? Now that we know where it's going to be built, or the plot of land that it's going to be built on, now we need to figure out what's going to actually house our goods, our items, our things of interest, our valuables. And that's our house. That's our storage account. And then the blob container, I like to think about that as a room within our house, right? Now we have our house that stores everything, but, you know, I have specific blob containers. I have specific rooms that store specific things. My room that I sleep in is probably going to store different things from the room that I'm making this video in, which is my office, right? So main.tf basically says, this is the house, this is the blueprint, this is where things need to get stored. Go and create those said things, right? So really the heart, I can't say it's the heart of it per se, but it is a part of it per se. And the only reason why I can't say it's the heart is because, like, there's some other pieces that you'll see that like kind of intertwine that we need, right? So, which is the variables.tf file. Now what the variables does is it's going to define all the placeholders or all of our parameters that are used in that blueprint, right? So this is just one script where we can set up all of our variables so our configuration is flexible, right? So imagine you're customizing a pizza, right? I like to think about variables.tf like the menu when you can choose different toppings, sizes, and crust types. instead of hard coding a one size fits all pizza, you can define the options. Like, what region do you want to deploy in? What the storage account name should be. Then you can adjust it later without rewriting the whole entire order, right? You can just go back and say, hey, I don't want to deploy this to East US2 anymore. I want to deploy this to West. I don't want to, have my Azure resource group name be Alicia All or whatever. I want it to be Alicia Hall or whatever, right? Same thing with the pizza. If we're building out that pizza, instead of saying like, okay, like I always want to create a cheese pizza, right? You can go in and say, okay, maybe this time I want cheese. The next time I want it to be pepperoni. This time I want regular crust. Next time I want it to be stuffed crust, right? But without having to go back and change everything, just the one little component, right, of how that combination works. So maybe the pizza example isn't the best for these variables. It kind of like ate in my head, but now that I say it out loud, it's just kind of like, okay, so what's the point? But essentially, this defines all of your variables, and it makes it easier to change it in just one spot and then inject it into where it needs to go, right? Now, our outputs.tf. This file is going to specify the important information you want Terraform to return after it builds your infrastructure. So that is like the one thing I will say about logging with all of these labs is that I've tried my best to give you some type of output based on what's going on. But really, if you want to get into logging, that will help you start to troubleshoot and identify specific errors that you are facing or issues that you're facing when you're building out your stuff. But anyways, like, let's just go back to the houses, right? Because pizza was like a miss, I feel like. So with outputs.tf, after your house is built, you want to know its address, right? You need to know, well, where did we build it at? You want to know the number of rooms that were built and any other details about your house. So outputs.tf, I like to think about it as our like post-construction report. It tells you, hey, your house is ready. Here's the address. Here's the key to the front door. So in Terraform, it's going to output details like the storage account name, the primary key, the container name. So that way you're going to know how to connect it to your resources specifically. And last but not least, in the Terraform group, we have our terraform.tf vars. And this file is going to provide the specific values for the variable defined in variables.tf. It's where you are going to put your custom options. So when we want our pepperoni pizza, we're going to come in here and say, hey, I want pepperoni pizza. If we want to, name our resource group something specific, we're going to come in and define that here. So this is where like all the variables actually live, and then they're injected into that variables.tf or called from that variables.tf. So now we know, right? We fill out our pizza order here. It fills in the blanks, and then your blueprint with the actual results you want, such as the name, the resource group location, etc., and unique storage account is all pushed in there, right? Now, one thing I do want to call out here that I don't think I talked about when we did this in AWS is this environment specification, right? How we're specifying dev. For any of you who are new into this process of automation and DevOps in this world, essentially we have different places that we can do things in, right? So typically we call them like rings or environments or stages. And so dev is typically where developers will go and deploy their code to kind of like ensure that it's working, right? So like I'm working in dev, it's not production ready. It's just like me saying, hey, like here's this work I've done. I think it can get promoted into these next rings at some point once it passes, all of my steps in validation. After dev is typically some type of test environment where, if you have manual testers, they can go out and test your UI, test your application, make sure everything's functional. And then you have a production environment, right? Production is where your end users are actually going to use and interact with the app that you're building. If you have a front end is like a website. So you're watching this video on YouTube's front end, but on the back end, there's a database that's storing this video somewhere so that way you can watch it. So boom, back end, front end, infrastructure, HTML, or like, UI, user interface, things you can see and touch when you're on your computer. Not touch, but see. Okay, so cool. So the reason why dev is in there is because when we start to look at building out our CI/CD pipeline and we start to build out different environments or different rings that we can deploy to, it's important to specify that there. It's way more than just three rings in a project level environment. You'll hear people talk about like dev, staging, and production. In a production level environment, there can be like hundreds hundreds of places that you're deploying to. It could be like areas if you're like a global company. It could be different sets of users, right? So some people have a ring for like, if you ever opt into like preview features, right? You're actually in your own environment or your own stage where you're able to see those features before others who have not opted into seeing it, right? So it'll depend on your business logic, how many stages you have. Whenever you're going through projects, you'll typically see 3. But yes, let's get into bringing this bad boy to life. All right, y'all. So we are on the home stretch here. Forgive me if this screen is a little small. I'm trying to work on the screen not being as blurry. And so hopefully this increases the quality a bit. I am still in my trial and error phase, but bear with me. At some point, I'm going to be the 5-star YouTuber that I was meant to be, doing tutorials that are like top tier. Anyways, so cool. I appreciate you all. All right, cool. So I do give a file overview. This talks about what each file does. So if you ever are curious and need more in-depth breakdown that you're not getting in this video, you have that for Python and Terraform within the README itself. I do cover the prerequisites as well. So what you need to actually set up your API account, your Rapid API account, and get an API key, setting up your Azure subscription and getting your subscription ID. I will be removing this. Sorry, I shouldn't even pointed it out, but I was updating this documentation like very late at night, and I wanted to remember where to start. And so that's why that's there. But this shows you the project structure. So how the files sit within the folder. That technical diagram that we went through in the beginning of the video will be housed here for you. We have an AWS to Azure translation. Like, I'm trying to make this as simple as possible for you to connect the dots. It's still going to be challenging, but I'm setting you up for success nonetheless, right? So I did realize that we never did a deployment to an Azure Container apps or to like Azure Container registry. I realized that we only did local on Docker, so I owe you all that to squeeze that into this. But nonetheless, once you set this up and clone it to your local repository, and like I'm using Visual Studio Code as an example, we want to first update this .env file. Now, there are 3 variables that you need to go and update: your Rapid API key, your Azure subscription ID, and your Azure resource group. Everything else is going to get updated from this terraform.tf-vars file, so do not worry about it. If it's blank, it is intentionally left that way. Now, I know what you're thinking, Alicia. I thought we introduced Terraform to reduce redundancy. Why do I have to put in my Azure subscription ID in the .env file and then my subscription ID in the terraform.tf-vars file? Great question. Well, I believe in self-sufficiency. I believe that you all should be going through this information and learning just enough to build a foundation, but also being stretched and challenged enough so that way you can actually retain what it is that you're taking in and not just saying like, hey, I did all these cool projects, but I really don't know how they work. So the challenge in this video is going to be optionally, if you want to, for the resource group name and the subscription ID, you can actually include that in the update_env.py file. I want you to figure out, how can I inject the subscription ID for Azure and the Azure resource group name into the .env file, because essentially they should be the same in both environments. So that is your challenge, to read through that and figure that out if you are someone who wants to really stretch yourself to learn and grow. If not, do it twice. But please make sure you use the same name right here and there. So anyways, we're going to set up our virtual environment depending on if you're on Windows or Mac. Install all of the proper dependencies with requirements.txt, and we are off to the races. So let's initialize our space, Terraform init, setting up the backend. Boom, initialize successfully. Now let's do Terraform plan. Now, Terraform plan is a great step because it pretty much is going to go and tell us like, hey, these are all the changes you are going to do. This is what you're going to add or create. This is what you're going to go out and destroy and delete, right? So I think I had already destroyed my previous setup, so it's just telling me to go and add the new things. And yours will probably look the same if this is your first time running it. Now, if you were to go back and change like the resource group name as an example, or you were to go back and change the drawing a blank. If you were to go back and change the resource group name or any of the names that you call, then it's going to tell you what you're destroying and what you are now creating. Now, Terraform Apply actually goes out and makes those changes. So it'll prompt you to say yes, that you approve. You want to actually make the changes that are anticipated to happen. So if you want to skip Terraform plan, you can, because like you also have the opportunity to type in yes to approve it if that's something that you want to do, or if you do not want to do. Anything other than yes will decline, like performing the actions. So all of this is going and setting up. It's going and creating those 3 resources for us. And this is like watching paint dry sometimes. Okay, great. So it successfully applied it. It created 2 resources and went and destroyed 1. So now that all of our resources have been created, we are going to run our Python update _env file. And essentially what this is going to do, helps if I spell it right. What this is going to do is now it's going to go out and find those variables for our storage account name and our container name. And it's going to now inject those into our env file to actually go and update it. So now we can run all of our scripts. This is going to go out and do everything. Fetch the highlights, store them in our container, go to the URL, download the video, store that back in the blob. Our entire walkthrough here. It will take a while for this script to run because of the retry logic, and there's like time baked in there for the resources to stabilize. So I think it's about like 60 seconds each time it like needs to create a resource. I can probably bump down that like the resource creation part, because like all of the resources now get created in Terraform. So we aren't really waiting for anything to be created. It all already existed. But that logic was in there from when we were using the Python scripts to build those things out. So whenever you see waiting for resources to stabilize, that's like the 60-second timer just running. So it's never going to be faster than that. It's a default or static time set for that. Great. Downloading the video. Sweet. So everything should be out there in Azure now. I still have like 150 credits left, and I've done a lot. So shout out to Azure for that. Okay, so we are going to navigate to our container, and here is our highlights. So this is going to be the JSON file. This is actually going to be like the text version of what we got from the API. So the URL will actually be stored in there itself. But in order to view the video, we want to go back to the other folder that says videos. And then this is the downloaded video. This is like the actual MP4. So let's open that bad boy up. And there we are. Basketball clip right there that we can play and view. All right, so we navigate to our storage account and we click on it and we see the highlights, which is just going to be that JSON file. I think we can get rid of this guy. Highlights, which is just going to be that JSON file like we mentioned. And then we have our videos, which is going to be the video that was downloaded there. So great. Same highlight as last time. So with that, that concludes our week 3 lab of our Azure DevOps Challenge. Tune in next week as we jump into CI/CD, and I will catch you next time in the cloud.